Welcome to the Zen of Reffing Roller Derby, Lesson 8, Outside Pack Referees. I'm Maxis of Stevel, the author of this training manual. I'm filming this on May 21st, 2018. The contents of this presentation are up to date as of this recording. Should this video become obsolete or otherwise replaced by a newer version, I'll place a link on the screen to where you can find up-to-date information. As always, you can find the latest version of my full training manual at www.tinyearl.com/zenreffing. A quick disclaimer: the WFTDA, MRDA, and JRDA are not responsible for the content of this training manual or of this presentation, nor do they make any claims as to the accuracy of its content. Lesson 8, Outside Pack Referees. We're going to do something a little different today. We're going to use URDUM. What's URDUM, you ask? It is the Ultimate Roller Derby Ubiquitous Magnet Board, a wonderful little internet tool by a fellow named Wonder Zebra. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So let me just slip down here in the corner. You can see for yourself what this is. All right, I'm down here now in the corner, so let's begin. As OPRs, and by OPRs I mean these three referees up here on top that are on the outside of the track, OPR of course being outside pack referee, they're going to be looking for a number of specific penalties and potential penalties during a game. I'm not going to go into detail explaining what these all are, but I do just want to quickly run down the list. We'll be coming back in later lessons going much more into detail on how all these penalties work. These are cutting the track, blocking with the elbows, forearms, and hands, particularly whatever like forearm is to the outside of the track, because the inside staff will not necessarily be able to see it. You've got back blocks, particularly when a skater is angled so that they're facing a little bit to the inside and their back is not viewable very well to the inside. The outside folks will see it better. You've got illegal positioning, such as like skating out of bounds penalties to the outside. Illegal contact, in particular out of bounds blocking to the outside. You've got illegal contact, including out of play blocking during no pack situations. And this is not technically something that's better viewed from the outside, but it's just that during a no-pack situation, the folks on the inside all have things they're specifically looking at it, and they may catch the out-of-play blocking, but they might not, because they've got a lot of other stuff going on in that instant, so the OPRs can pick up some of the slack, and the out-of-play blocks are something to look for. And again, we'll come back into detail in later lessons on all this. They could be looking for star pass violations and pass interference. That is not necessarily visible to the inside. They look for high blocks near the inside line. Now, just a little something I just want to explain here. You know, high block is you know, like any sort of forceful contact of the head or shoulders. But let's say this pivot is right here, or actually let's use the jammer here. This jammer is being blocked by, let's say, yellow 3, right here next to the inside line. And we've got the purple jammer referee right here. But notice how close to the inside line the purple jammer is. So purple jammer referee needs to look down. Now, if you're standing next to another person, or at least very close, and you look down at their feet, you can't see their head anymore. You're too close. One way to avoid that, of course, the jammer referee can move back and try to get a wider perspective, but that's not always feasible. Sometimes, like, the IPR is in the way and they can't move back. So the way to avoid missing the high blocks in this case is the outside pack referees are looking up. So when this person is next to the inside line, the outside pack referee just ignores the inside line itself. They don't look down at the feet. They only look up. They're looking for potential high blocks, forearms, basically anything that would be out of sight of that jammer referee who's looking down at the feet. Similarly, it would work in reverse, by the way. When this person is by the outside line, now the outside pack referee is looking down at the feet, and the jammer referee would be looking up, much more for the high blocks and like the forearms and such. We've got illegal re-entry from the penalty box. Skater basically returning from the box who's not entering where they're supposed to be. They can easily see that from the inside, but the inside referees are, it's a much more mentally taxing job on the inside. The outside pack referees have the physically more taxing job. The inside referees have the more mental like processing effort. So they sometimes will miss skaters coming back from the penalty box and re-entering in the middle, whereas the outside pack referees are going to be able to catch that a little better. You've got skaters taking an illegal route to the penalty box, and finally false start warnings and failure to yield penalties for, if they fail to yield the advantage that they've gained. So again, all of that will go into future lessons explaining what those are, but that's roughly the list of, higher priority things to be looking for. Outside pack referees can absolutely call a penalty on anything they see. Just make sure you see it. Also, be really wary not to step on the toes of another referee. There are some things you really wouldn't want to call. This foremost, for example, outside pack referee here, if, let's see, here we go. Yellow jammer comes in, and it looks like they've gotten a back block, on purple pivot here. Purple pivot, is knocked down. Well, the foremost, referee here doesn't have a particularly good view of their back. Besides the fact there are skaters in the way, they're also almost 30 feet in front of that skater. So you really don't want to be making the call, that call. Whereas the rear OPR here might have a perfect view on this action, and they would be much more likely to make the call. So if the foremost OPR calls that as a back block, besides the fact that there's a significant probability they might be wrong. I mean, they might be right. They might get lucky and just get it. But they might very well be wrong. They're potentially, if this rear OPR did not call the penalty and the jammer referee did not call the penalty, this person is potentially overriding their no call and declaring it a penalty. So you want to be a little wary about doing that. There's a number of communications that the refs on the outside of the track are wanting to give to the inside. I'm going to go over these real quick. Number one, nodding. Nodding is for something like this. You've got yellow, let's see. You got yellow jammer is going to try to come here and go through the outside of the track. Purple blocker is going to try to intercept and knock them out. Purple blocker 3 is making contact, and this person doesn't quite go out. They've managed to stay 2 inches or whatever in bounds. The inside staff can't see this very well because, again, they're looking up maybe at the high blocks, and they've also got a lot of skaters that are in the way. So how do you communicate that this was not, the person did not go out of bounds. This was an entirely legal pass. Everything's in order. You nod. You just simply, you don't even have to make eye contact, although, if you can look away and do it, great, although probably wouldn't want to in this case because there's a lot going on. But yes, just give a nod, because the yellow jammer referee is going to look up at, say, probably the middle OPR, whichever OPR is right here, and they're going to look up, and if they see that nod, they instantly know that means, okay, yellow jammer was fine. Everything that person saw was legal. If they saw penalty, they'd call it. And if they saw no earned pass, they'd be signing it. Which brings us to now what no earned pass is. No earned pass basically means that it wasn't a penalty level action, but it wasn't a legal pass either. So, for example, purple 3, let's move everybody else up a little bit here. Okay. Purple 3 goes in for the block on yellow jammer as yellow jammer is going by. They successfully block yellow jammer out. But purple 3 also goes out of bounds. Their foot has just barely touched the line and gone out. So yellow jammer then returns in front of them. This is not a legally earned pass. The jammer was supposed to be on the track, and obviously the jammer was not because they went completely out of bounds. But it's not a penalty either, because purple 3 lost their position on the track when they went out of bounds. So no earned pass is this. So this is what the jammer referee would instantly look up, point it in the the outside pack referee would instantly look up, sign this in the direction of the jammer referee. And ideally, the jammer referee will see that and immediately mirror the signal back, because they're telling everyone that I have noticed this pass and I'm ruling this to be a no earned pass. It is not considered a legal pass. Not a penalty, not a legally earned pass. That may be important later, because suppose this was the beginning of the jam, when this person gets out and they don't get lead jammer, now the yellow jammer ref, remember, is going around going, not lead because of no earned pass, not lead because of no earned pass. Finally, let's say this is like late in the jam, and yellow jammer comes in here, and they've got purple jammer hot on their tails. Yellow jammer kind of gets about right here. They've picked up a point now for passing the pivot. They haven't quite passed these two, but they know purple pivot is about 1 second away from following them and starting to pick up points. So yellow jammer I think I said purple pivot. I meant purple jammer. So yellow jammer starts tapping their hips. Let's call off the jam, But the yellow jammer referee can't see it. There's too many skaters in the way. It's just too much clutter in the way. So the outside pack referee starts tapping the side of their helmets. This was not on our list of hand signals we went over because this is not an official hand signal. This is, however, a very useful form of communication. So by tapping the sides of their helmets, they're not calling off the jam. What they're doing is they're signaling to the jammer referee, your jammer is now calling off the jam. If you believe it should be called off, you may take this as verbatim that they have met the criteria of, tapping their hits. So at that point, yellow jammer ref, even though they can't see the person's hands repeatedly tapping their hips, but on the word of the OPR, can now signal off the jam. Thus that would get the jam called off. Yellow jammer may, say, pick up 2 points or something, 2 more points before the jam's called off, but the jam gets called off before purple gets anything. This is important because without that signal, yellow jammer ref's going, I can't see it, I can't see it, I can't see it. They're moving, and they finally get it up here, and yeah, yellow jammer picked up the extra point now because they picked up the 4th blocker, but now purple blocker's in the middle of the trap, and purple picked up 2. And so now the scoring has been affected by this delayed call-off. It's not really the fault of yellow jammer ref. I mean, they have to get it right, but sometimes it's extremely difficult to get it right because they cannot see it. So that's where the tapping of the helmet comes in handy. There's also a few miscellaneous duties that the OPRs can do. These are duties that might otherwise distract the inside pack staff, the inside pack referees, the jam referees. This is not to say that OPRs are less important. What this is saying is that the IPRs in particular, all 4 of the inside referees, have a set of duties which take very high priority. For the jammer referees, that's keeping score. They really can't look away and deal with certain tasks because they have to be able to keep score, keep up with their jammer. For the IPRs, they're constantly looking at pack formation. And one of them can tear away, but the other one is now going to be doing double duty on watching for out-of-play action in the front and back, and it can get very difficult. It's very difficult to do with just one. It can be done, but it's difficult. So by the OPRs taking up a little bit of the slack on some extra tasks, it's significantly easier. It makes life easier on the inside 4 referees. One of those, for example, would be checking on potentially injured skaters near the outside of the track. So yellow pivot has fallen down and they're not really moving. The rear OPR just simply stops and asks, can you continue? They make their own assessment. Now, rear IPR is perfectly capable of going there and yelling across the track, which is not ideal way to communicate with a potentially injured skater, or if necessary, even skating across the track to talk to them directly. Can you continue? Are you injured? But again, now they're taken away from their duties up here. It's a simple thing for the OPR to stop and check in on the person. If the person just gives a thumbs up and they're just momentarily winded. They took a pretty good hit, momentarily stunned. They just want a few moments to recover before they continue. Fine, then they continue on. The OPRs will also assist with removing debris from the track. Not a lot of debris on the track, but it does happen sometimes. In particular, toe stops fall off. Now, skaters are trained on avoiding objects on the track. The problem is they can't always see the objects. A toe stop itself is fairly visible, and they can usually see that. But the washer from a toe stop is easy to miss. It's not very big, and it's easy to miss. Jewelry, similarly, sometimes falls off. Fitbits fall off. Different things fall off. So anytime you see just a little bit of debris, something that potentially a skater could fall over, it's a very nice little quality of life thing, for everybody involved. If an OPR just takes a moment, just swoops in and just grabs whatever it is and hops off the track. An NSO from the inside, if there's no skaters around, may do so as well. But an OPR might be able to do it a little faster because they're on skates. And, it also, OPRs ultimately are wearing safety gear and NSOs are not. So it's probably better that since we're getting on the track during a jam, that it's somebody in safety gear doing this. But, bottom line, if we can't get the debris off the track, it's no big deal. But if we can, great. Just so you know, a fallen helmet cover is generally not debris. For example, the jammer's cover pops off and falls on the track. That's not debris. That's the jammer cover. If we're useful in the jam, we need that. The one time that a helmet cover really would be considered debris would be, for example, there's a star pass, so the pivot is now a jammer, but in the process of trying to get the jammer cover on, the pivot cover falls down onto the track. Now, there's no pivot left in the jam. They can't have a pivot for the rest of the jam because there was a star pass. So, in that particular case, they're probably not going to race back and grab it, and the blockers are going to be very wary about picking up a pivot cover because they're worried maybe they might get a penalty, and such. That would be a good example of, as soon as there's nobody around, just grab the pivot cover and just chuck it back in the direction of the bench. You're just taking a piece of debris off the track and potentially, saving an injury. So it's a handy thing to do. Looking for and enforcing instructions from the penalty box manager. I'm going to say, for example, like Purple Jam Ref over here is actually the penalty box manager. Well, when the referees are kind of skating around the corner, now admitted they're looking into the track, but out of the peripheral vision, they might be able to catch if the penalty box manager is holding a whiteboard above their head. That is the penalty box manager's way of communicating to the inside of the track. We're not going to go into detail here on interpreting what's written on the whiteboard. We'll cover that in a later lesson. But oftentimes there is kind of a code they use on there, basically a code stating that you need to issue a penalty to a certain skater and send them back to the box, or perhaps just send a skater back to the box. They owe us some time. So that if you can take care of that and get that person sent off to the box and save the IPRs from dealing with that, so much the better. The IPRs actually have a better view of that whiteboard because as this person's skating around the corner, and they're looking at like a skater here, they're looking right across and they're seeing that penalty box manager holding up the whiteboard, but they don't always see it. Sometimes there's just a lot going on in the game and they're just distracted and they're not catching it. So any referee really can catch that and assist in the process. OPR is certainly among them. If you can take care of that, you get bonus points for awesomeness. Now I want to talk a little bit about what happens if a skater does not hear your penalty call. And this is a lesson that not all new referees know. Here's what you don't do, okay? Yellow jammer is scooting through. Yellow jammer, I don't know, let's just say back blocks the pivot here. This person, the purple, yellow jammer ref, let's get them. Yellow jammer referee, it was a little bit too far forward, and that happens sometimes, and they couldn't quite assess whether it was a back block. The rear OPR said, oh yeah, that's definitely back block. So they call it, tweet, yellow 3-3, whatever their number is, yellow 3-3 back block. But Yellow Jammer doesn't hear them, which often happens. Venues are loud and Yellow Jammer continues to play, and they're kind of a new ref and they're not really sure, and oh my goodness, maybe because the Yellow Jammer had a different issue, maybe I was wrong, so I'm not going to follow up on this. I'm going to swallow that whistle, so to speak. I'm just going to just kind of shut down and hope nobody heard me issue the penalty. Well, bad news. There's a good chance the penalty tracker did hear the penalty, or some of the referees. Some of the skaters might have heard you issue the penalty. The bench staff might have heard you issue the penalty. So now at the end of the jam, in comes marching the purple coach, requesting an official review, wanting to know why Yellow Jammer was not sent to the box for the back block penalty that they were issued. And now we've got significant impact on a jam, and it's also just sloppy officiating. We really don't want this to happen. So the procedure that that the rear OPR should do when this Yellow Jammer ref comes in, tweet 3-3 back block, they don't hear it, they continue on, is start skating forward. Leave your position, start skating forward, and keep repeating the penalty. Now, you don't necessarily have to repeat the whistle. It can be useful for getting their attention, but it can also cause a little confusion with the penalty staff that might think additional penalties are being issued, because Yellow Jammer might come in and commit a second back block. That would also make a whistle and yellow, 3-3 back block. And now the penalty tracker is confused. Well, was this one penalty or was this actually two back block penalties? And the referees may actually be very confused themselves. So avoiding the whistle when you're repeating a penalty is kind of handy. So yeah, the rear OPRs come zooming in, repeating it. Eventually what happens is if you're signing this or issuing the penalty in a position where the skater can see the penalty at the correct volume and you're given the correct verbal cues, etc., eventually it can mandate an additional penalty. A skater has some obligation at some point to hear the penalty and get off the track. But without going into that, you basically, just keep repeating it until you can direct that skater off the track. Now, sometimes those skaters are booking, maybe this person committed the back block, but then they're gone. They're just racing, and this OPR just has, starts skating up, and then they realize, there's no way I'm going to catch this person. This jammer's going way too fast. So you got two choices at that point. You can basically try to communicate the penalty to the inside pack referee, who might say, okay, tell the front, okay, you got the pack, and they race back here and communicate it to the yellow jammer referee, who then gets this person off the track about right here. So that is a perfectly acceptable way of getting the issue dealt with. But the inside pack referee is not always kind of seeing what's going on. So another way to deal with it, start skating clockwise. This referee skates clockwise, skating clockwise around the track. The yellow jammer referee is going counterclockwise, and the twain meet about right here. And here's our yellow jammer ref. And then this person can say, all right, yellow, pack block. And, oh, okay, and they leave the track. If nothing else, this this jammer referee is going to see the OPR over here yelling right at their jammer, and this will get that will get their attention. They'll go, oh, it's definitely a penalty on my jammer, and they will get this person off the track. In one of my early games, I screwed up. I totally screwed up. And what happened is we had an OPR. I think it was the front OPR. I'm jammer referee. I'm the yellow jammer referee here. And this person up here in front calls a forearm penalty on my jammer. The trouble was it was very loud, and I couldn't really understand what this was. Was this on my jammer? Was this on somebody else? I thought he said a different number, and I'm confused. So I skate on, and as I skate past, I just see this referee over here just yelling something about a forearm, and again, I'm confused. Are you talking to me? I can't hear you. I can't tell what's going on. My jammer made 2 passes around the track like that, and then finally the jam ended. And the head referee, the other coach comes in, is just furious. Why isn't this jammer going off the track for a penalty? I'm confused. Was this my jammer? I don't know what's going on, and I did not have time to stop and assess what was going on. And none of the other referees came back to me and, ordered my person off the track. So there's a lot of fault to go around here. This was my error for not getting it right, because I have, as the jammer referee, it's my responsibility to get those communications from other skaters. I was fairly inexperienced, so had I had more experience, I probably would have done better getting it. But on the flip side, this front OPR never left their position. They stayed there. Had this front OPR raced back and been right here as the jammer and I came around and been repeating the penalty, I'd have gotten it. Similarly, they didn't really communicate it into one of the pack referees on the inside, who might have gone over and just, assumed, okay, well, my jammer referee is being oblivious, but I've clearly got a penalty on that person, so I'm going to order that person off the track. And it didn't happen. So we wound up with irate coaches and sloppy officiating and such. And I certainly have some of the fault in there, but I think the officiating and some of the other parts could have been better as well. Your job is to avoid having this happen at your games. It was this is, over 3 or 4 years since this happened, and I am still deeply embarrassed. And I don't like to tell this story, but I'm telling it here because I want you to learn from my mistake and from the mistakes our crew made. Get the person off the track. Now, you can run into a little bit of confusion sometimes because a jammer referee might override a call. And overriding call is not really something I talk about because there's no formal process for it. There's no formal criterion. But it happens sometimes that a referee will yell a penalty and the jammer referee will say, no, stay on the track. First off, that's a rough position to put a skater in because now you've given them conflicting instructions. And you might have the other referee that might repeat, no, get off the track. And now you've got the skater in a no-win situation. But sometimes you will override another person's call because it's absolutely wrong. You can see you have a piece of information they have. Generally speaking, you don't override a call unless you are 150% sure that the call was wrong. If you are even 99% sure the call was wrong, don't do it. 150% sure. You have to have a piece of information that that other person did not have that warranted the call being overturned. Maybe that's what the referee thought I had. If he knew how inexperienced I was at the time, I don't think he would have. But for whatever reason, it didn't. Things didn't get tracked down. This is my way of saying that, in jams, it's better to follow up on things until, like had this person come around here and ordered the jammer off the track, and then watched me say, no, remain on the track, call overturned. At that point, the referee would go, oh, okay, and because now they know 100% concretely that their call was overturned. But it's just better to follow up with things than not follow up with things and risk having, a cascading series of errors, which is causing increasing amount of impact on a jam. So let's see. Oh yes. So there is one last thing you can do if a skater's not hearing you, and this, be very wary about doing this. The referee on the outside can skate to the center and either communicate it to the folks there or just skate to the center and go over to get another referee off. It's very rare. I think I have seen this once in 300 and something games because it's really not necessary and it's more effective to go to the outside. Also, the front OPR doesn't have a very good way of skating to the center because they risk players moving forward and they're totally in the way of the game now. So you really don't want to go there and do that. But it remains an option, and I never say never. There may be cases where that is the appropriate thing to do because there's a critical piece of information that needs to be delivered in a timely fashion. Generally speaking, though, just skating clockwise, meeting the jammer ref, following the person, wherever they are in the pack. That's the way to do it. You can also communicate stuff to the referees next to you. This mostly happens when you're penalizing blockers. This person is repeatedly yelling for yellow pivot. They've got a penalty, yellow pivot. And finally this person just picks up on it. And now that they're in front, and maybe their voice isn't going out, whereas this one's is. That's happened to me in a game. They can then get the penalty, assessed and get that person off the track. So you got your options. Choose what works best for you, but follow up on it and make sure that it is that penalty is being issued. Talking a little bit about coverage here. The outside pack referees are going to focus fairly heavily on jammer coverage, or on the jammers, and the interaction around the jammers as they go through. Now, this is certainly not all the blocking in the game, and that is not the only thing they need to be focusing on. But since jammers are the only people that can score points in a game, that's where the bulk of the action is going to occur. So you want to focus very heavily on that. I am very fond of telling my referees that you want to line up in such a way that there is a straight line between the jammer referee. Here we go. I think I can do it this way. There we go. You see this line right here. Jammer referee, the jammer, and an outside pack referee. And I like that sort of thing. Now, that is certainly, there are exceptions, times not to do that. But if you can make a line, there we go, a line exactly between those three, generally speaking, you're going to get pretty good coverage. So there are some exceptions, like, taking a case like this over here, where this jammer is stuck back here, but there's a whole lot of blocking going on between the blockers in the middle, then certainly this person, might be doing more good, kind of covering in the middle here instead, like this person might be a little bit ahead, or this person up here, that may not be quite even, but there's only one. There's not a lot of limited view stuff going on, and they can still get a pretty good angle even if they're a little bit ahead. Whereas this person may stay back here to kind of cover all the blocking that's going on with this group. So, there are times when you're not going to form the straight line. It's the appropriate thing to do. But generally speaking, that's the way you want to do it, at least in my opinion. One of the things you're going to learn about OPRing is that everyone's an expert on OPR coverage. Even referees that haven't been OPR in 5 years will tell you that they are experts on OPR coverage. You will get a lot of different perspectives and different views from people, different opinions on how things are to be done, and that's okay. OPRing is really more of an art form than a science. There are a lot of extremely useful guidelines, but very few hard truths of that it absolutely must be done this way at all times. So the more experienced you are, the better of a skater you are, the better just overall as a referee you are, the more you're going to be able to break those guidelines because you'll know the times that it's appropriate to do it. But it's as you're newer, as you're just getting started, sticking with the guidelines is just going to steer you right the vast majority of the time. Let's see. Yes, here we go. Your communication. Loud and clear. Verbal cues should be done very loud and clear. You should repeat your hand signals. Again, you're on the outside. Sometimes they can't see things on the inside. Sometimes they can't hear you on the inside. You're also communicating to the benches. Make sure all your communications, whether verbal cues or hand signals, loud, clear, slow, distinct, repeated. In the case of hand signals, sometimes held up high. Do that. You want to avoid double calls. What is a double call? A double call is the two pivots are here. Doesn't matter who it is, but the two pivots, and one back blocks the other, makes it fall down. And you've got three referees, so this would be a triple call. Three referees all seeing the action, all blowing their whistle, all calling the penalty at the exact same time. And on one hand, you're like, oh, that was so sweet. Three of us all in tandem. I've seen it in a game even with cutting calls where five referees all at the exact same time nail the call. It's it was wonderful for so much confirmation. But the flip side is this: you now have 2 or 3 or 5 referees all issuing the same call at the same time, which means that it's taking a very high level of your mental focus in that moment. And a lot of those referees could be focusing on the rest of what's going on. They're not watching the rest of the game as well for potential penalties. So, yes, if the referee next to you blows the whistle, it's not a bad thing to, when you blow the whistle at the same time, to just let them make the call. Let them take the initiative on issuing the call, because that way you can be focusing and watching for other penalties while they're doing so. And if you hear that turns out they're actually issuing a call on an entirely different action, then so be it. They may also have a piece of information for you. For example, yes, purple pivot back blocked yellow pivot down, but that's because yellow 1 forearmed this person and pushed them over into yellow pivot's back. That means the penalty actually goes to yellow 1, not to purple pivot. So in that particular case, this person might have been just about ready to call purple pivot on the back block, but because they held out and waited for a second and they heard the penalty on yellow 1, they can immediately say, oh, okay, that was a piece of information I didn't have. It's very important. This is no call on purple pivot. And now they didn't issue a bad penalty because of that. So that could be very useful. Let's see, what else we got here? I got so much in my notes here. Let's see. Ah, yes, OPRs. They rarely define the pack or issue out-of-play warnings, but sometimes it's necessary. Pack formation and out-of-play warnings. The primary responsibility for pack formation goes to the rear IPR. Secondary goes to the front IPR. Tertiary responsibility falls to the OPRs. Because generally speaking, between the two of them, unless they're very, very rookie, they ought to be able to get 99.9% of the pack formation done. Now, there are going to be times when the IPRs just make a mistake. They just miss something. They didn't see a skater come back from the box, came back and joined the rear group, and that formed, that made the pack back there, or changed where the pack is or something. In that case, absolutely, speak up. You're assisting at that point. But generally speaking, you don't want to be calling a no-pack situation when you're an outside pack referee, when you think, oh my goodness, this is a no-pack because they're, the pack is split, it's 10.5 feet apart, so I'm going to call it. Because the IPR might be perceiving that as, 9.5 feet or something. Maybe their angles slightly different, or they're just seeing it a little different. So you're stepping on their toes if you are just constantly harping on them to get those calls done. But absolutely, if there's something they're not seeing, they're distracted making a penalty call, the front IPR is distracted making another call or doing something else, and you spot there's a no pack, by all means you can step up to it. But out-of-play warnings work somewhat similarly with like a skater who zooms to the back. Maybe they're trying to draw back the jammer. Something this person is, the yellow is the engagement zone right now, so they've gone out of the engagement zone, but the IPR is busy calling a penalty over here, and they're missing this. Now, I'm getting my jammer referees mixed up. A jammer referee at this point would certainly step in and do the out-of-play warning, just to, make it kind of clear that they're out of range here, but an OPR could easily speak up and do the same thing. So if you notice that a skater has managed to slip out of the IPR's net and an out-of-play warning needs to be given, by all means, speak up and give it. Now a few tips here. First, accelerate before the pack reaches your position. So if you are this person's standing up here. I'm going to just say for a second the pack is this jammer. This jammer is the entire pack. And so the pack is racing up here, and when the pack gets here, if the pack is going kind of fast, and this is the moment the person decides to start accelerating them, they're going to get to about here when the pack is to about here, and then they're going to get to about here when the pack is now coming out of the turn. This person has been completely blown away by the pack. So, especially on the curves, you have to accelerate early and accelerate fast, even just to stay even with the pack. Packs have a much smaller distance they're taking when they're traveling along a curve than the OPRs take. So you have to accelerate on a curve and then decelerate when you leave the apex, but you have to accelerate just to avoid being left behind. One of the things that happens sometimes when the pack is really sprinting around and the OPRs have gone to sectional coverage is that, let's see, don't mind, things a pain to use sometimes. Okay, as this OPR is coming around the curve up here, and the pack, again, I'm just going to say this yellow jammer up here is the entire pack for this argument. So the pack is coming around, but the pack's going fast. So the OPR is already starting to get left behind, and the pack is sprinting fast. Sometimes what will happen is this person, they're the rear or the OPR here, they're signaling, they're gesturing, go, 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 because that pack is so fast. If this person does not do a rapid acceleration early, they're going to get absolutely blown away. So they may have to accelerate early, and then the pack will catch up with them by, say, about here. But now this person has enough speed, they can at least moderately keep up while they're on the curve. So, you may have to accelerate really, really, really early, especially when that pack is going. The stronger your skating skills, the less of a problem this is going to be. You'll have the acceleration, or at least the top speed, to kind of keep up. The weaker of a skater you are, the newer you are at this, you're not all that sturdy on your skates yet, you're going to have to start a lot faster. So always be aware of the location of the other OPRs. Generally, we do coverage. Let's see. Send everybody back. There we go. Toggle full screen. Okay. Generally speaking, we're keeping 3 on the pack. 1 in front, 1 kind of like in the middle, 1 sort of in the back. And I generally like to have 1 staying even with the jammers, but your mileage will vary in the advice you get from your mentors. But one of the things that happens is if this pack starts sprinting, this referee might go, okay, I'm falling back. And they fall back along the curve. And that's great because now when the pack sprints, when the pack comes around, I'm going to say this person's the pack, when this pack comes around, this person's already in position to pick up the pack. But if it helps to be aware of what's going on, because in this person, in the OPR falling back to over here, as this pack is kind of sprinting around, this OPR can go, okay, well, I need to adjust my position now because I don't have anybody who's got my back. So this person falls back a little more to watch the backside, and this person might fall a little more into the pack to kind of keep an eye on the coverage here. And they'll try to keep up as this is going around. It's just very useful to know where all the other OPRs at all time. It's also very useful because this person might be running off, not because the pack's going fast, but because they have to chase down a penalty. Somebody went to the penalty box, but they went to the penalty box like this along the track, and that warrants another penalty. So this person is zooming off to the box to go issue the extra penalty to the person. So knowing that the person has left and is not providing coverage allows the other OPRs to adjust their positioning. So it's just, you always keep half an eye, to your periphery to know where the other OPRs are. I want to mention leapfrogging. Leapfrogging is this. The pack's moving along. This person is going, they're struggling to keep up, but they're falling behind. They're out of position, which in turn is making this person who doesn't want to pass them. They're falling out of position, and they're having trouble, now you've got 2 referees out of position. So leapfrogging can be a few things. It could be this person just saying, switch, and they just pass them. Switch is a very polite comment, basically saying, I'm saying we're switching positions, and this person races past them to keep up. You'll sometimes have to do this when you're working with OPRs that are not strong skaters, and the pack is going at, if not a sprint, at least maybe a moderate clip. And the switch can also happen with yellow pivot has committed a penalty. They illegally knocked, say, the jammer out of bounds, and yellow pivot is now falling back trying to draw the cut. But the rear OPR is not the one that issued the penalty. It was the middle OPR, and the rear OPR doesn't quite know what's going on. So the middle OPR is going to fall back as well, and they're going to say, switch, because that way they can go back there and make sure the penalty gets issued on yellow pivot. And what was the rear OPR just seamlessly just slides up a little bit and takes their place right in there. So OPRs it's becoming kind of a current trend that people like to have their fixed OPR position. I'm the front, I'm the middle, I'm the rear. The reality is that OPRs want to be fluid. You're going to have many games where you're going to work in different positions, and in the old days, why in my day, the OPRs were they didn't have fixed positions. They constantly swapped positions every time. Every jam you'd begin in a different position. It was nobody took an ownership of any particular role, and it's very helpful if you can kind of keep in mind that OPRs actually don't own their position. Even if you're doing the rear for 80% of a game, you might have to go to the middle for 20% or 10% or 5% and be comfortable to make that transition when it occurs. Finally, I want to tell you to watch for skaters, bench staff, audience members, etc. in the outside safety lane. They do get in the way sometimes. Turn coaches, for example, they might have a special box by one of the turns marking where volunteers for one of the teams can stand and tell their skaters when they should call off a jam or whether they should keep going. But sometimes they get a little excited and they take a step or two into the safety lane. If you're an OPR, you really don't want to be crashing into them. So, same thing. So a photographer might take a step or two into a safety lane. A coach who is in a legal area but then takes a step or two, But sometimes audience members are they think the game is over, so they start walking into the safety lane, or some idiot audience member who's trying to look for a better seat decides to walk into the safety lane in the middle of a jam and start looking around there trying to find where the empty seats are, and you have to be very cautious of that. Don't be afraid. Remember, the front OPR is often skating backwards, so they're not going to see someone behind them in the safety lane. So if the middle OPR notices, there's somebody in the safety lane, that this person is headed right towards and they're not seeing them, by all means, go warn the person. That's a safety issue. We don't want anybody to get injured because of this. Now I want to talk a little bit about coverage. There we go. I want to talk a little bit about coverage here. We have two forms of coverage that we do. We have sectional and we have fluid. Fluid, back in the day, was known as skate and weight. Skate and weight meant different things to different people, but the fluid half-lap rotation had a very specific defined meaning and practice. It basically worked like this. At the beginning of the jam, they would start about like this. This person would start looking at the line, this person would start before, this person would start generally pretty close to the pivot line, if not right at it. The reason being is, as the pack starts to go, the rear OPR would fall back to turn 4. They would ideally arrive at turn 4 just as the pack is arriving around the corner up front. Matter of fact, I'm going to move a bunch of skaters off here just so I can more easily represent the pack with just a single skater. They want my engagement zone. Okay. I'm not even going to worry about jammers for now. All right, this lone skater is going to be our pack over here. So at the beginning of the jam, the purple one is here. As purple one moves up, this one is moved up, this one is moved up, this one is moving back. They're going to exactly in line right here with this line. Well, I can't do it diagonally. With the line, the outside line, so they can look down it and see if a skater goes out of bounds. That can be a useful piece of information when issuing a penalty. So, purple one comes over here. They're coming out of the curve. And the rear OPR, who's this person now, is going to drop off. They're going to stop about right even with this line, and they're going to look down it. So, purple one continues heading. Now, this person had been kind of staying near the front, of it. Now they're falling back, and they're kind of getting in the middle or even the back of the pack a little bit, because they're about to pick up a new referee. This person is, excuse me, still standing here looking up the line. As soon as this begins to go around the turn, this person is also falling back. They are roughly mirroring where the front referee is on the other side, because that way, when the front referee is arriving on the other side, the pack is coming around the turn, and this person has arrived to be even with the line. So basically, we have two fall-off points. we have right here, turn 2, and we have a second one at turn 4. Referees will drop off at turn 4, just like at the beginning of the jam, that rear OPR dropped off at turn 4. I'm moving everybody at once. Then we have 2 pickup points. We have turn 1, and we have turn 3. So referees are constantly dropping off at turn 2 and falling to 1, or dropping back at turn 4 and going to 3. So they're basically just shifting. They called it fluid because it's constantly shifting. There's 2 on the pack, and 1 either falling back or waiting for the pack. They call it half lap because in the end, each referee will do about half a lap at a time. They're actually, since they're falling back and forth a little bit, it's actually a little less. So, just as an example, right up here right now, if the pack is coming around the turn and the rear one drops off. So let's measure the movement on this rear one. So they're dropping off right here at turn 4. Okay, pack goes on, this person's picked up. And they're moving around the curve. Pack eventually arrives at the far edge. Okay, and that OPR has dropped back here. So they've gone, the length of basically about the apex right now. This one drops off. This one continues. The pack arrives over here. That one falls back. And these two track it around. So this person has now gone a net distance of 0. I mean, they fell back along the apex, but then they came back. So far, they haven't actually moved anywhere on a net basis. Pack continues on. This person is now the rear of the 2 over here. This person's getting ready to fall back. They continue on. Oops. And now on a net basis, this person, who originally was the one that started right over here, has now gone half a lap. They have gone from turn 4 to turn 2. And then this continues on. These two go around the curve. There's our pack. And this person falls back. So the funny thing is the net gain at this point now is, not even half a lap. But really, since they're falling back, we're getting into the second set of their movement. So, I mean, realistically, they went half a lap. It was more because there was a back and forth along an apex, but they have moved half a lap. Hence, fluid half lap coverage. Fall back on turns 2 and 4. Fall back to turns 1 and 3. If you are falling back along a straightaway, you are probably doing it wrong. There are some times you might move along a straightaway. Those are a little more advanced. I'm not going to go into them here. That's the old day coverage. That is also what you should be doing now when the pack begins to sprint, because you ain't going to keep up. Unless you're in a phenomenal skater on the outside, you're not going to keep up with a sprinting skater. They just have much shorter distance to go than you do. So even if you can go the same speed as them, they're going to blow you away. So nowadays we use sectional coverage. And sectional coverage basically means you've got one person kind of in back of the pack, one in front, one kind of in the middle, moving back and forth a little bit depending on where the jammers are. So, because again, remember I talked about you want to make those nice straight lines. I've got to move these people around. But yeah, these nice kind of straight lines to be like, looking where the action is. And this is sectional, and it works great if the pack is not moving fast. But when the pack moves fast, it doesn't work. It breaks. It falls apart, and you have to basically switch to the fluid half-lap rotation. The problem is that, why in my day? That was all we did. We did entire game, the entire game was fluid half-lap. From the very start, all we did was fluid half-lap. We never did sectional coverage. Or if we did sectional, it was only for the duration of a power jam, just because packs really don't move during power jams. But otherwise, everything was fluid. Nowadays, that's not the case. Nowadays, almost everything is sectional. So, as a result, sometimes the referees are not falling off when they should. So, I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm going to show you a piece of footage. I have permission from everyone involved and the leagues involved to show you this footage. This is how not to transfer from sectional to fluid. And I'm going to talk a little bit during this video so I can explain what exactly you're seeing and what I'll pause it periodically to show what the mistakes are that are being made. Okay, you're looking at a game here. It's paused for the moment. This is between Mass Attack and Jersey Derby. This was filmed about 2 years ago. And what you're seeing ahead of us is turn 2 on the track. I'm going to hit play. Let's watch what the OPRs in the background do. Pack starts to go, and the rear OPR right here does not drop off. Instead, he keeps going. So now he's falling behind. We've gotten to the next turn. What you can't see, he didn't drop off there either. So now, as a result, we get back up to turn 1. There's no one waiting to pick up. And now our foremost OPR here has now pretty much fallen behind the pack, and there's no one to pick it up on turn 3. So now we have no OPRs on the pack at all. Now we got one. He did get a nice head start, but he just can't keep up. So the pack is going, and you can't keep up when the pack goes fast. And again, no one to catch up on turn 3. So we get back to turn 1. We got another OPR joining on. This is good. He's falling back a little bit. There should be someone at turn 3, and there is not again. So all 3 OPRs at some point have missed the opportunity to fall back. We get back to turn 1. We got someone here. This is good. And now the jam ends. Oops. So basically what we have there is all the OPRs forgetting to fall back at turn 3. They're letting sort of their pride, I can keep up, I can do this, I can catch it, keep up with them. That's not what an OPR wants to do. An OPR wants to be saying, this is a mark of pride that I know when to fall back because I'm going to be absolutely in Ace's position. I'm going to totally nail it when that pack comes around and I'm right there to catch up. So start by being humble. The first mistake they made was that an OPR really should have fallen back right here at the beginning of the jam. Show that again. Pack starts to take off. This gentleman here, see, look, he's about to fall back, but then he changes his mind. And I get it. Sometimes it's a little hard to make that decision. And in another game, the pack might have slowed down. It might have been the right decision. But then he absolutely should have dropped off here at turn 4, fallen back to turn 3, and he didn't. And as a result, the other OPR started doing the same thing, and it all went to hell. Okay, now I want to show you another piece of footage. This is going to be an 80-second clip, so it's kind of long, and it's going to show what happens when the pack starts going clockwise. This happened at the Battle of the All-Stars tournament, and by the way, if you look very closely at the THR's table in the far corner near turn 2, you will see me sitting there. Now, you're about to notice that the pack's going to do something funny. It's going to begin going clockwise. And there it goes. Now this is new one on the referees here. They're not used to a speedy little pack moving clockwise, and they're not sure how long it's going to go. So let's take a look and see what the referees are doing here. We've got 3 on the pack, but look how they're falling back now. All 3 of them now are behind the pack, so somebody needs to be falling out. One was gesturing for another to go, but they had a little miscommunication. Okay, we're not used to kind of falling back in reverse. He catches up. The pack is going. But we've got one, again, still way behind the back. Absolutely should be falling back, and he finally dawned on, but notice he's totally out of position to pick up the pack. So he's just waiting over there to catch up. And he goes on. And it's just, again, it's a tricky situation. They're going clockwise. They're not used to what the rotation is in clockwise. Yeah, it's understandable. And so it absolutely threw off their positioning. I also want to mention 2 referee coverage. Now, one of the quirks of Derby is that we like to have 7 referees because, that constitutes a full crew. And 7 referees is not always ideal because sometimes you're throwing in somebody who's basically a body just in there. Other times, you want to staff a full crew, and you just can't find them. That is all you've got. You have 6 referees, and this is what you got. So, for whatever reason, periodically you're going to have 2 OPRs on the outside. And at this point, you're triaging. You basically can't be everywhere at once. And so one generally goes in front, one goes in back. You try to keep an eye on the, with the action around the jammers, particularly when the jammers are near the outside. If they're near the inside, not quite as important. Over there, you can be a little forward and still look for the high blocks. You have more flexibility. But when they're on the outside, you got to be right there so you can be looking for the cuts. If the pack starts going pretty fast, then you just keep up. You stay sectional. The 2 of you stay on there until one of the referees cannot keep up, and then they fall back. And this in the fluid half-lap rotation, we talked about, no, you always fall down and you wait exactly here, but that assumes that they've already got 2 on the pack. Well, you can't make that assumption here. So if you need to fall back and start skating along the straightaway to kind of pick them up, and that way you can get that second person, I'm going to say the pivot's the pack, pivot's pack down here. So if you fall back, along the straightaway just so you can get in earlier, so much the better. Just don't get blown away if the pack is going kind of fast, because if they pass you, that's really not a good thing. But basically, kind of go where you need to be to make the coverage get done. It's not easy to do with 2 referees, but if they're good referees with good skating skill, or if the pack just isn't going too fast, it can work. The 1 referee coverage, as I put in my training manual, is sprint like hell and pray for slow derby. It is very difficult. You're just constantly playing triage, and you're not able to be everywhere you need to be at once. So you pick the most critical place where you can be and just get in there and provide coverage for it. My suggestion is, if you have to choose between 2 roughly equal priorities, take the front one. Because that way, when you're done with that, if the rear one's going on, it's much easier to fall back than it would be if you took the rear one, and then that gets done, and you need to go speed up now and get up to the front engagement. So it's easier to fall back than get up front. A little homework for you. I want you to go to refed.com, ref-ed.com. It's a training site. He does much better video, like much higher production quality videos than mine, and watch them. He's got some awesome stuff on there. Werner von Bombed has 3 videos in particular on OPR coverage. I strongly recommend you watch all 3. He will go into more detail on coverage than I will, and you'll learn quite a bit. And if nothing else, it's a different perspective. As I said, OPRing is an art form, not a science, and everyone's an expert and everyone's a critic on OPR coverage. And if you have access to some scrimmages where you can get 3 OPRs on the outside, even if that means maybe they're doing with less staff on the inside, spend a scrimmage practicing the rotation. I made my referees one time that I trained spend half of a scrimmage only doing the fluid half-lap coverage. Now, this is more or less outdated coverage, except when the pack is sprinting, but they were very grateful for having had half an hour to do it, because they got done with that coverage, and it now was second nature to them. They now knew how to instantly fall back and where to fall back. It is a skill that is far easier to say you have than for you to actually have. Go practice it. So that concludes Lesson 8, Outside Pack Referees. We'll be back in Lesson 9, which is Inside Pack Referees. Thanks for tuning in.